Next up, we have Deuce Vaughn, the running back out of Kansas State, and I said it in the Zach Evans video a few back, but what a tough guy to evaluate, and Deuce might be even tougher. For those who aren't familiar, he's a guy who was listed coming into the year at 5'6", 176, which was already incredibly small, and then at the combine came in at 5'5", 179, so he's even shorter. And it's interesting because I imagine that means he's going to be off the board for a lot of teams, right? You can't have that much of an outlier frame and still be in the discussion for many organizations, and just from what I've seen. But at the same time, you put on the film, and a lot of the questions you might have as a result of his size, it feels like he answers. So that makes Deuce really tough for me. I'll be honest. As far as the testing results, didn't run at the combine, and the only thing I saw for his pro day was a 4.46 unofficial 40, which is understandable, right? I mean, he's got short little leg. 4.46 is just fine, right? He's an explosive guy, no question, as you'll see as we get into the film. I thought the 17 reps on bench was notable because, again, I think people are just going to look at the size and think, oh, he's this weak little guy. No, he's not only feisty, but he's actually strong in many regards, right? So in that regard, let's look at his stats here really quick. Just a do-it-all guy for Kansas State as far as both the rushing and receiving was concerned. He was top 5 in the FBS in carries this past year with 293. So if you say, oh, 5'5", we don't think he is durable enough to sustain a whole NFL season, the only thing we really have to look at as evidence that he could last a season would be the next best thing, which is this past season in college. And what did he do? He played 14 games and, had a bigger workload than almost anyone else in the entire country. And to that end, that's just talking about attempts. That's not even talking about snaps. I'll just touch on this really quickly. There's a game I was evaluating against Oklahoma. He was in the field for 83 of 89 snaps. I don't know if you guys know how rare that is or how absurd that is, but I would say most starting running backs across college are on the field for maybe, just off the top of my head, I would guess about 2/3 of the snaps, right? Whether it's taking, get a big run, bringing the backup, right? Maybe, hey, I need a break, I need some water. Whether it's, hey, he's a really good receiving back, but he's not good as a pass blocker, let's take him out. Whether it's, hey, it's short yardage and he's more of a scat back, take him out, right? All these guys across the entire country are getting pulled and rotated in and out, except Deuce Vaughn, right? Except the only guy who we might have size and durability concerns about. So that's why I think in one way, those durability concerns aren't real. They are, but they aren't, right? Because no one had really a higher workload than Deuce. And in that regard, you see the stats, you see the crazy numbers, 3,000 yards rather over these past 2 years combined. Touchdowns galore. He was busting big plays, averaging over 100 per game. Let's get into the film and see just what you guys think. Because for me, I think, starting off with the vision, I think it's very good, right? For a guy where people say, oh, can he see, everybody talks about that for quarterbacks, right? Oh, can he see above the offensive line? Well, Deuce probably can't, but hey, he works around it, right? He's gonna find the cracks, right? He's gonna find exactly the space that he needs to make plays. And is it always, the prettiest thing in the world? Not necessarily, right? Are there some, some cutbacks? Are there some plays where maybe he'll take a false step in one direction and, work back the other way? Yeah, sure. Of course there are. But hey, he will find some open space for your team, and he will do the most that he can with it, right? As far as speed and excel, again, we talked about the 4.4, 40-yard dash. I thought on film he maybe even looked faster than that and looked more explosive than that. He could get brought down from behind, but at the same time, just the ability to hit his top speed quickly, I thought was very impressive, right? When it comes to bursting through the line of scrimmage, not only seeing those creases and cracks in the D-line, but exploiting them, I thought Deuce was very solid. He could get the edge and work around on some of these outside zone plays. He could bring it back inside and run away from guys on inside zone plays and up the middle. I just thought in both of those regards. Vision, speed, and excel, very good. And then there's another one, right? The agility. I gave him a 9.5 out of 10 on agility. I thought he was incredibly impressive just as far as the change of direction ability, the sort of make you miss, elusiveness style, get where he wants to go, get where he has to go, right? He can work you inside, outside. I was talking a couple videos ago about, oh, this guy can't really string moves together. Well, watch Deuce Vaughn if you want to know what I meant by that, right? Because he can juke inside, outside. He'll work. Oh, man, just beautiful stuff. As he sets up defenders with his moves, he's setting up second defenders, it feels like, when he's only working on evading the first one, right? Just it's really masterful watching him sort of work in space against defenders here, especially as, you know, there's more and more space to work with. It gets even better and better to watch. As far as the power, you know, there's definitely some questions here, and I don't even think there's questions. I just think that there's not much, right? You know, I gave him a very low score there, no question, but I think that's sort of to be expected. Although I will say the balance, the ability to absorb contact, you know, maybe he's never looking to really run through guys, but if he gets hit by a guy, it doesn't necessarily mean he's getting ragdolled, right? Sometimes he will. You saw it. I added one of those clips during the power segment, but he just does a good job, in my opinion, utilizing sort of that low center of gravity, the shorter legs, right? His feet are on the ground more often, and he just keeps on moving forward a lot of the time. And I was really impressed by that. I didn't expect to give him, you know, maybe it was just coming in, my expectations were lower as far as the balance was concerned, but I thought, you know, across the, I watched, 6 or 7 games of Deuce. I thought the balance was definitely more, I'll just say better than I expected, right? It was more impressive than I thought. You know, I was usually on my grades, next up goes pass blocking prior to pass catching. So I was already looking at my notes before I realized what segment we were in here. I was going to say, yeah, not the best category, but we are in one of the best categories, actually, as far as the receiving ability is concerned. Not only an ability to just bring in the ball and pick up yards after the catch, but the ability to get open, the ability to find soft spots in zones, the ability to work out of the backfield, the ability to get open on, you know, there's a little bit of a pick there, but the ability to get open on a wheel route and bring in a nice ball over the shoulder, right? Very impressive. If you told me that Deuce was, you know, at some point in his career more of a receiving back than he was just a pure runner, I wouldn't be shocked at all, right? Again, just an ability to get open, exploit mismatches, use, you know, the quick feet and agility on some of the inward and outward breaking routes. But then, hey, when it just comes to getting north and south, he can do that as well. And then he can make you miss after the catch and turn a lazy little route to the flats into a first down. And that's just what it felt like Deuce was. It felt like he was just a volume chain mover, right? In a lot of different regards. I mean, who's lining up their starting running back, that, especially guys that I've made a video on so far, and having them run out routes against defenders and get open at the chains, right? Not very many guys. And, you know, that's why there's so many clips to show. I have to toss, you know, a -1 or 2 in there just because that's kind of how I like to do things. I don't think anybody's necessarily perfect in some of these categories, right? I gave Deuce a 9.25 out of 10 on pass catching. He was that was definitely one of his best traits, and he was one of the best, if not the best, in this whole class at receiving. I would say probably second to Jameer. Now, this is the category I thought when you heard me groan earlier as far as the pass blocking is concerned. This just isn't where you want to use him. But at the same time, he has a lot of practice doing it, and that's what I thought was really interesting, because a guy his size, you'd think, oh, he's never going to pass block. But like I said, he didn't leave the field, right? 83 out of 89 snaps in this game. He's going to have to block sometime, and he did. And it's not even, you know, only as a pass blocker either. They would sometimes have him block as a lead blocker for the QB on some of these QB powers. It was really interesting. I have a couple of those clips coming up as well. He would lay guys out, which probably, you know, drew some laughs for that defender's next team meeting when they're going over plays from the last game. But I was really impressed with Deuce as far as, I don't want to say being the full package, but for kind of the package I was expecting, I think he was really impressive. And I think I have a higher grade on him than most. right? And maybe that's just the college game. Maybe it's just the conference he played in, right? Things are so spread out. This little small, tiny guy was able to do the most out of there, right? I mean, there's a play as a lead blocker, and we're putting touchdowns on the board. You know, here's a play. It's against Anthony Johnson, another prospect. See ya. I mean, I think it's tough to look at him, and you know, there are some negatives, right? Again, but I think it's tough to look at Deuce and just say, oh, you know, he's going to get ragdolled. He's going to get bullied, right? No, he's going to come down and trying to lay the wood on some of these guys, right? Not as much as a runner, but he's willing to do it. He's willing to try, at least. That's what I liked about Deuce. There was nothing that was sort of outside of his sphere as far as his roles and responsibilities were concerned. As you can see here, I gave Deuce a third round grade, albeit it's the very bottom of the third round. My cutoff for the third to fourth is a 71.50. So he came in just above that with the red flag. And what the red flag means is that I'm just grading the film. If we were doing this, you know, for one of the 32 teams, you'd have to bring some element of the size into play, right? Because you can't just encapsulate, I don't think, these like 1% size guys. You can't just encapsulate them with a standard size grade, in my opinion. He's such an outlier that you'd have to really consider, do you want that to impact the grade or not? So for me, he's a third rounder based on the quality of play and the quality of film that he put out there. But if there are questions about what he can do at the next level due to the size, maybe you take him in the fourth or in the fifth, right? And to me, if you're getting him into the fifth in particular, or into the sixth or even the seventh, I'd be, I don't want to say shocked, but I would be very excited if I was that team, right? Because that would be a very good, solid value pick, and a guy that I think will be very solid and productive for your team. And it could be in a variety of ways, right? It could be in the return game. It could be on some special teams. But I think, you know, to me, a lot of it will be on third down out of the backfield. Maybe line him up at receiver on some reps. Get him some outside zone plays. Try and get him in space and use his skill set to the best of your abilities. Now, you know, I sometimes like to talk about where I think a guy will go. This one was interesting because with Deuce, it's hard to get a read on like what team would be willing to take a guy with such an outlier size sort of profile, right, or physical profile. Well, Deuce's father actually is a scout for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not going to speak that into existence, right? But if there's any team on planet Earth that has the answer to that red flag and feels probably comfortable with it, it's going to be the guy's dad, right? So I would say look for Deuce. You know, I hate to go for easy teams like this, but I think Deuce could be in sort of that, I don't want to say Tony Pollard-like role, because obviously Tony's still there, but with no Zeke, Tony might become more of the lead back. I wouldn't be shocked if that was a team that went out and tried to get Deuce, right? Wouldn't be shocked by any means. I would almost say I expect it to some degree. And in that regard, I'll be excited to see what he is able to bring to the field here in 2023 and beyond, because I really do think he brings a lot to the game, a lot more than I maybe expected. In that regard, I thought solid player. I give him a third round grade with that little red flag, right? So would I necessarily take him above somebody that I have just graded below him? Maybe not, right? That's sort of the exception, because you have to consider that size. If someone graded a 71.55, has no size concerns at all, has no concerns, then you're probably gonna take the other guy first. And I think that's the case here with Deuce. Very solid for me. I have him in the third. Probably would feel more comfortable in the fourth, but anything past that, and I think you're getting a little bit of a steal. So with that said, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of likely your team having drafted Deuce, and if it was the Cowboys, you could tell me I was right in that regard. But maybe it won't be, right? Maybe some team will sneak up on him. Imagine if like Philly or someone takes Deuce from his dad. I mean, that would be tough. That'd be really tough. But he could do that, right? Like kind of the role that Kenny Gainwell had last year for the Eagles. If you told me that Deuce Vaughn was going to have that role for whatever team he went to, I think that's exactly how he needs to be used. And I think he could despite the size, I think he could fulfill that to a pretty high level. It was also interesting. I will talk about this really quickly before I go. Just sort of as a final thought here, or as a last sort of interesting anecdote. The only other running back that I've really seen at this size who's done much of anything in the NFL is Darren Sproles. And the most interesting thing is, where did Darren Sproles go to college? Boom, it was Kansas State, right? So it feels like there's maybe a type that Kansas State program has, and if they're gonna churn out another guy in the same sort of, if anyone, I should say, is going to be able to live up to that sort of Darren Sproles like role, and if anyone can overcome the size, like Sproles did, it might be the guy that followed exactly in his footsteps, right, and went to the same college and was in the same program. With that being said, I think I'm able to look past the size a little bit more than most, because I can kind of see it, right? I can see he's been around the game his whole life, right? His dad is inundated in it every day. His dad was a talented player. He's following in Sproles' footsteps, right, at Kansas State. He was just as productive, if not even more so. Same size, right? And in a lot of regards, a similar kind of player, right? Even though Sproles is little, he was known for his toughness. And I felt like that shined through on Deuce's film, even though he wasn't the most powerful guy, right? Like I said, just continuing to keep those legs churning through contact when they're hitting him, and even as a pass blocker, standing in there and at times just throwing the grenade in and trying to blow it up and make sure do whatever he can to keep that guy from getting to the QB. But he would do it. Right, there was a willingness, and in many regards, despite the size, I thought there was an ability. So with that said, if you did enjoy, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We already talked about commenting. I'll be very curious to hear what you guys have to say if your team drafted him. And past that, that's pretty much it. So I'm mic'd up, now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys. I will see you next time.